Hello there. Welcome back to another episode of On Our Pursuit. I'm excited to introduce you to my new friend, Scott Krava. Now, Scott is the founder of the brand DRMN Big. He is the maker of the hoodie you see me wearing right now. This will be one of the few brands outside of Pursuit that you'll see me rocking from time to time. I came across Scott and I came across DRMN Big thanks to Instagram. The ads were on point and I ended up really enjoying watching the work that he was doing with the sweatshirts and the t-shirts. So I ended up buying one and absolutely loved the design and everything behind it. So I became such a fan of his just through Instagram, and the ads hit me up that I decided to reach out to him to learn more about DRMN Big, learn more about what it is he was doing, and to hear his story. Now, one of the things that you're going to notice right away is Scott likes to deval the words like I do. Pursuit doesn't have the vowels. DRMN Big he has stripped out as well. You hear more about this sweatshirt in this conversation and the design behind it and some things maybe you don't notice right now, but after you hear Scott talk about why he created this sweatshirt the way he did will make more sense. Leading into this episode, a few things I want you to pay attention to, since I always try to give you something to focus on as we come into it. I want you to first pay attention to Scott's creative process. I really enjoy creativity and people expressing themselves, learning more about how he became a creator and starting this company years ago with him and his friends with no real background in creating. The second thing I want you to pay attention to is how he's been able to continue to build DRMN Big over the years while having a corporate job as well. Not every pursuit needs to be starting a business and going all in on it right out the gate. It can be something you do on the side that is a passion that allows you to build a business slowly, and then maybe at one point you do make that jump. And the final thing I want you to pay attention to, we spent a decent amount of time talking about community, and that's something that I think is very important. I have a community for financial advisors that I've started. It's a very big buzzword right now, but listen to how we have this conversation about community and how I see the potential for DRMN Big to have a community and how you could go about building that. Maybe community is a part of what you'll do in the future. Maybe seeking a community is another one, but it's a conversation piece that I didn't have planned. It was not a part of the outline. It just naturally came up, and we spent a decent amount of time talking about community, so I wanted to bring that to your attention as well. All right, before we get to the episode, as always, I'm going to ask you for a favor. Take a moment throughout the conversation. Whenever you hear something that really speaks to you, head to the comments and let Scott know what it was about that comment, how he motivated you, how he inspired you. Yes, I would love to get comments to help this show rise up, but really I want Scott to get feedback because as a creator, you don't always get to hear how your words and your advice or your story impacts people. And sometimes that feedback is just the thing you need as a creator, as an entrepreneur during a tough time to keep on pushing forward. So let Scott know what you enjoyed about his story, how he motivated you to keep him going as he goes on his pursuit. All right, with that, I will let you get to this episode with Scott Krava, the founder of DRMN Big, as we talk about building the brand, his creative process, community, and so much more. Enjoy the episode. The name DRMN Big has no vowels in it. And for whatever reason, I have been a fan of eliminating devaluing words. So pursuit, PRST. I have a little side project I've done before where I stripped out most of the vowels of financial advisor so it looks like Financial Advisor. Why did you take the vowels out of DRMN Big when you started this brand?
We'll probably get into this more later, but I think that was one of the things that I was probably most strategic about when I came up with the concept, in that, I wanted to have this more of a positive message type brand, which back in when I was brainstorming this, like 15 years ago now, like I didn't see a lot of. So I saw an opportunity there, but I didn't want it to be too clean cut, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And I also wanted one of the things I learned when I was, sometime in high school is that with anything creative, like if it doesn't catch someone's eye, you've already kind of lost. Mm-hmm. That's like the first thing that needs to happen before anything else can be considered by the consumer. So I thought, okay, if I take the vowels out, that right there is going to at least cause someone to probably stop to try to figure out what it means, what it stands for. Mm-hmm. That was really it. And I wanted it to kind of be cryptic a little bit, and I wanted people to have to stop and think about what it says, what it means. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, they're spending time thinking about my brand. It's, they're contemplating and it's, kind of planting a seed in their head that is, whether it relates to my brand or not, but it's the positive message, whatever that's reinforcing for them or wherever that's reminding them of, that was the goal in naming it what it is. The other thing too is like, at the time it's like you want to come up with a unique name, and it's like you could Google similar brands that are dreaming big, big dream, whatever variation of it. I wanted it to be different from all those in some way, shape, or form, and taking the vowels out did that for me. That's pretty much it.
So you were ahead of the game of devoweling, because I feel like that's something in the last few years I've noticed more people doing. So you were thinking of it way. So you are a futuristic creative.
I mean, thanks. I don't know. I'll take it. I don't know if I am, but I'll take it.
So going back 15 years or so ago, when you were beginning to develop this brand, what was so important to having a brand that was a positive message, just versus just a cool brand? Like, why was it important to have that strong positive message behind it?
I just felt like it was something different, like I looked at all these other street brands that were popular at the time. And granted, like I was living in Des Moines, Iowa at the time, which is a smaller market, Iowa in general isn't necessarily exposed to, the bigger brands, the trendy things that are happening on the coast until, a couple of years later. I assume that's probably changed, within the past couple of years, or if not more, with, just the internet and the connectedness that we all have now. But, I really just thought there was an opportunity there to kind of like do what everyone else in streetwear is doing, but do it a little bit differently with a message that empowers people. And at the end of the day, I was like, all right, that's great. That's like something that I could just realistically spend the rest of my life doing, like encouraging people in some way, shape, or form to build their dreams, to chase their dreams, to build the life they want to live in whatever pursuit that is, whether it's creative, whether it's, they're an athlete or, an entrepreneur, whatever it may be. I just felt like it was a common message that would resonate with a lot of people. And at the end of the day, if I can use my creative stuff to help empower people to take a jump or whatever that may be towards something they weren't sure they could do, I love that.
Well, the thing that's pretty cool about it is, not only are you creating this message to inspire and empower and having cool clothes, because I don't know, I'm one of the people that I get inspired by the things I might be wearing. So putting on your hoodie or looking at your things, like I'm the type of person that inspires me. Music inspires me. So there are a lot of people out there, but not only are you creating, not only are you giving me an opportunity to express myself and empower myself creatively, but you're showing us how to do it by having this brand and doing it yourself. Like you're dreaming big yourself with your brand, in addition to helping us all dream big as well, which I think is really cool. And I see parallels to pursuit as well. Like I want people to pursue their passions and align their spirit, mind, body, and money, find their authentic life. And I'm doing that myself through the creation of pursuit and these things. So I think it's pretty cool. Was that intentional to say, hey, not only is this here, but watch me as I do it myself?
No, it's interesting you say that because, we met like 20 minutes ago, via video, and you were able to come up with that almost instantly. It took me probably up until like 3 years ago to realize like that's what I'm doing, and to like make that connection, that, okay, I can take like my day-to-day stuff and what I'm learning from that, or, whether good or bad, and I can share that with other people to hopefully help them. And it's like, wow, this all kind of, it all kind of runs in a natural cycle that like makes sense to me. And like, once I actually sat down and had that realization, things started to click in a different way, which was awesome. So it's interesting that you were able to pick up on that, almost instantly. I love that.
I think it just feeds into my belief of like aligning spirit, mind, and body. I always leave money out because like money is an important part of it, but I think that those three things make that easier. And it sounds like as you've gone on your journey, slowly but surely this alignment was falling into place. And for whatever reason, the light bulb went off of what I'm doing is what I'm trying to inspire people. And I can not only, lead, but I can actually educate them through my full-time job that I'm doing, the knowledge I get there. So I think that it's just shows how this alignment makes things fall into place. And it sounds like once you made that connection, things kind of became maybe a little bit easier. Maybe the direction became easier once you found that alignment.
100%. It gave me direction on where it gave me direction on where I could go. And it made it, in hindsight, I think it kind of gave me a mindset shift from one of creative scarcity, so to speak, to one of abundance.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you're a Rick Rubin guy or not. I think you might be, based on one of your articles that you wrote. But that was one of the chapters that I listened to it like 2 weeks ago, and I was like, holy cow, I can relate to this so well.
Mm-hmm.
The abundant mindset. And it's like, once I was able to adapt that, I guess, it was a huge relief. It was like, oh wow, like this river is just kind of flowing all the time. And I took a lot of comfort in that, because for a long time I thought, I'm doing this thing. I don't really know how to do it. I'm watching what others are doing and kind of doing my version of it. But and that was fine. I learned a lot from doing it that way. But at the end of the day, a part of me was just like, well, how do I get ahead?
Mm-hmm.
How do I get ahead if I'm trying to, I have a few ideas here and there, but I'm kind of just hanging on to them, and I don't know if any more are going to come. How do I get ahead? And then once I had adopted or realized I was transitioning to this abundant mindset, it was like, oh, I can do this for a very long time. I can do this till I die,
Mm-hmm.
which is great.
Yeah. I am a big Rick Rubin fan. I have the book over there. I've probably given away like 10 copies of it. Yes. And I love Rick Rubin for many reasons. One, he's created a lot of music that I love. I love how he transcends genres. Like most producers live in a certain genre. So he would be only a hip hop producer because he started in hip hop, but he's country like everywhere. And then now he's transformed into this kind of like spiritual guru for musicians who come to him. And like, I just love everything about him. And I would love to be a producer, but I'm not musical at all. Can't play an instrument, never have. But as I've listened to his interviews over the years, he doesn't do any of that either. He produces just by listening and giving people inspiration. I'm like, well, maybe one day I could do that. So I love Rick Rubin, and his message is really, really, I think it's a powerful one. And what I hope comes from these conversations with individuals like yourself is that I think that for a lot of people who are living the lives that maybe they're not feeling fulfilled in, I think creativity and expressing your own inner creator, however that might be, is a great guide to find your way towards something that might bring you more happiness. Maybe it's a new career, or maybe it's just a little side thing. But creativity, I think, oftentimes is pigeonholed to art and music and photography. But like, you can be creative out in a garden and expressing yourself creatively, being a gardener, or like, there's tons of ways to be creative. And I just think there is a great connection between, and this would go to Rick Rubin, that our inner creator, I think, comes from our heart, and our heart is a connection to the source, and then there's this flowing. And if you can get that alignment again, I think it leads you in a great direction to help you find more happiness and a more fulfilled life. So I love that you like Rick, and it's probably no surprise that we're both Rick Rubin fans and connecting across this stuff. So
have you finished the book?
I have. Yeah, I pre-ordered it as soon as I saw it was coming out, and
Same.
I realized that my book wasn't going to, the book was going to come later in the day, whatever, like January 16th or whatever. So I bought the audio book to start listening to it, partially too because Rick narrates it, which makes it even better.
That was one of the, when I first heard his voice on the audio version, I was just like, yes, this is going to be something that I'm going to come back to for years to come.
I've got a book that I'll send you, but I would encourage you to get it on audio as well. And anybody listening, if you're listening, you might like it as well. It's Questlove's book. It's called The Creative. I forget the second part of it. But it's about the creative process, very similar to kind of Rick, but a different angle. But Questlove narrates his book as well. And there's like music he puts into it and beats in the background. It's probably the best audiobook I've ever listened to because of the experience. So I'll send you the physical, and then you got to get yourself the audio version of it.
Done. I've got credits just waiting to be burned. So,
so going back to dreaming big, as I kind of take our conversation all over the place, you mentioned being influenced by street brands, what were the street brands back then that you were pulling your inspiration from?
Man, that's tough. I think the biggest one that comes to mind without giving it a bunch of deep thought is Young and Reckless.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I don't know that I was necessarily inspired creatively by it, but I think I was inspired by the way that Drama, the creator of it, kind of made it happen overnight. Granted, he had a lot of platforms in place that allowed for that rapid growth, but I don't know. For some reason, I remember thinking, like, if he can do this, and I don't think he had a lot of experience in that industry going into it, there's no reason that I can't either. And which I didn't have anything else sound to go off of other than that. It was just like, well, if that guy can do it, I can too. And you know, at that time, I didn't know a lot of what I was planning to do or what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to do something. I don't have any formal education in art or being an entrepreneur. I have a degree in kinesiology, which isn't really, it's a little bit of everything, you know? So yeah, that's a big reason why my process is a little bit more drawn out. You know, a lot of things didn't come to me until I started doing them, which you know, there were times I struggled with that, and now I've come to, you know, just embrace it as part of my journey, and you know, things happen for a reason, and all that. I know we're going to get into, you know, doing things, would I do anything different, or if I have any regrets or anything like that later. But to go back to your original question, you know, truth be told, like, I'm not super into fashion. It's not something that I study a lot of. I'm not really looking at what other trends there are or anything like that. And maybe that's something that helps me, is that I don't see all these other brands and stuff doing things that would potentially deter me from doing my own. Because as a result, I might, you know, see it and be like, oh, someone else is already doing that, blah, blah, blah. And so yeah, I don't, aside from Young and Reckless, I don't know that I had a ton of brands that I was like, ooh, I want to make a version of that. It was more, I would see designs that I would like that would speak to me in a certain way, and it was like, ooh, I wonder if I could do a Dreamin' Big version of that. And I know we're going to talk about creative process later, you know, in one of the first designs that I did was like a remake of the Tabasco logo for Dreamin' Big. Why? I'm not really sure. I do like Tabasco. I'm not like a fan of it, but I don't know. It was something about the logo that I just liked. And I think when you can envision like what their logo looks like and how you would revamp it, when you have that vision, it makes it a little bit easier to pursue it. But, yeah, other than that, like, I didn't have a ton of brands kind of lighten the way for me, so to speak.
It's funny you mentioned Young and Reckless, because prior to maybe 6 months ago, I wouldn't have known that brand. I went down the path of Cole Bennett, you know, Lyrical Lemonade, and what his music video producing and all that stuff. And it led me to an interview when he was on Drama's podcast. And I was listening to the podcast, and I was like, that dude sounds familiar. And I saw him, like, he looks really familiar. And then I put it together that it was Drama from Ridiculousness and, you know, Rob Dyrdek stuff. So going back to, like, okay, this guy has no formal background in a clothing company, built it up to be really big. And in addition, if you watch the show, you're like, Drama doesn't look like he's very ambitious at all. So surely if Drama can do it from the way he was portrayed on MTV, then, you know, I could go do it as well. So I think it's interesting that I wouldn't have known Young and Reckless if we had talked a year ago, but the brand that kind of inspired you to get going, I actually know of just by chance. So that's kind of cool.
Right. And but it's no knock on Drama by any means.
Oh, no. I know.
It was, and I know that's not what you were saying either, but I don't want anyone else to think that, like, I'm hating on Drama, because that's definitely not it. It was more just like, all right, I think I can do what that guy's doing. And, you know, like you said, like, he's on Robin Big, Ridiculousness, Fantasy Factory, like, every week, and you're seeing him wearing the stuff, and it's like, all right, I see what process he's using. Like, he's got someone creating stuff for him. He's using his appearances on TV to market it out. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, there was just something about it that I was like, I can do that too. Mm-hmm. I just need a TV show.
Exactly. I want to stay with the fact that fashion isn't something that like excites you. Like, maybe that's not the right way to put it, but that fashion is not something that like you're super, super drawn to, yet here you have this clothing brand. What is it about expressing yourself through the hoodies and the shirts and the hats that versus going another direction? Because you could have spread the message of dreaming big through other avenues. If you're not somebody who's really always been into fashion, why do you think the clothing brand spoke to you so much?
Man, that's a good question. I should probably spend some time on that one. I do remember growing up. I can't remember how old I was, probably in high school at some point. And granted, like I said earlier, living in Iowa, in Des Moines, that's a small, big city, if you will. We just didn't have a ton of options compared to others. And I remember at one point having the thought, like, I could make something better than what's available right now. Mm-hmm. I think that's what I was drawn to. And I didn't, at that time, I had no visions of starting a clothing brand or anything like that. But for some reason that stuck to me. And I mean, that was probably a good 25 years ago that I had that thought. So there was a small seed there to some extent. Why did I gravitate towards clothing compared to like just doing, printed art or anything like that? I really don't know. I think I just wanted maybe it was the walking billboard aspect of clothing that like people are promoting it and using it to express themselves. Now, looking back on how I've done everything, I'm really glad that I chose clothing, because one of my core values now for like anything I design is like you said earlier, I want people to feel a certain way when they wear their dreaming big gear. I want them to feel empowered. Mm-hmm. Like when you put your like the right combo outfit on and you just like look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, wow, I look great. I feel good. Like that's how I want people to feel, whether it's with my stuff or not. But like there is something about making people feel a certain way, and if they feel good about themselves, it's gonna impact them in a positive way.
I'm a big believer in look good, feel good, be good. Like I've written about it before, I talked about it before, and my little asterisk next to all that is it's look good, feel good, be good for yourself. Like how you feel. So when you look in the mirror and you feel like you look good, doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. If you feel like you look good, you're gonna walk around with a little more confidence. You're gonna do a little bit better. So I love that. And one of the things I love about like design, the sweatshirt I'm wearing today, I make sure everybody can see it. I love the fact that like the intentionalness of putting the dreamer upside down to everybody else. Now, I don't know if this is the reason why, but the reason I like it is when I look down, I'm reading it for me, and I have, which that resonates with my thought process. I have 2 tattoos on my forearm that are positioned for me to see, not for everybody else. The rest of my arm is for everybody else, but I have a couple things that when I look down, they're looking at me so I can see it versus for everybody else. So like when I see your hoodies and your shirts and Dreamers upside down, like for me, I knew immediately that was for the person wearing it to look down and to be reminded, which I think is really cool because everything else usually is for it's the billboard side of things. You want everybody else who sees it to read it and want it versus this is for the person wearing it. And the cool thing is, even though you see it upside down, you know what it says. Like, so it still works from the billboard standpoint, but I love that intentional design behind it.
And it's funny you mentioned that. I'm reminded, like a couple weeks ago, I got a DM from someone. They're like, "Yeah, I like it, but I really think you should flip it so it's right side up because it's going to cause a lot of people to stop you and ask you what it means." And I'm like, exactly. I didn't respond to it, but I was just like, it's kind of the point.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I didn't even think about that part. The part of it being upside down and somebody asking, well, what's that mean and why? And it made me think of the financial advisor sweatshirts that I made. Like when I would wear it, because there's no vowels, I get tons of people talk about it. Oh, good thing you're good with money because you can't spell for shit. Like it just little conversation pieces, and other advisors who have bought it have said that like when they wear it, inevitably somebody's going to ask them a question about it. It's just a conversation piece. So I didn't even think about that on the flip dream.
That's what you want. You want people, if people are talking about your thing, like that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. assuming it's positive.
Yeah.
But it's like they're spending time on it. We're so distracted. We have so many things that we could focus on throughout the day. And if someone's willing, if they're going to be spending a few minutes talking about your thing, like that's a positive. But yeah, to your point, like, yes, the intention was so that, the Dreamer was for you. And also the arrangement of the different assets forms a smile. That's part of it too.
I did get that as well. Yeah. When thinking of the creative process, I don't want to get to the creative process quite yet, but I want to think more about Dreaming Big, the brand. Do you have aspirations of it being bigger? Like I think of like the Hundreds. I don't know if you've ever read Bobby Hundred's book, This Is Not a T-Shirt, but in it he talks about how the 100th Street brand ended up turning out to be like this big, massive community, even though they didn't set out for it. In today's world, people are starting communities and they're very intentional about trying to build it. But because the Hundreds had a meaning behind it, it grew and had a following and community came from it. And like there's opportunity I see for Dreaming Big to be bigger than just the clothing brand. If you want to empower people and help, as the brand grows, as the community grows, there could be opportunities to do other things under the Dreaming Big umbrella to help that, whether that be, courses on, hey, here's how you go manufacture gear, which, because you have an abundant mindset, maybe you would do that, because the reality of it is there's enough people to buy sweatshirts and hoodies, and you might help somebody in the Dreaming Big community start their own brand that in theory might be a competitor to yours, but they're going to have a different message and a different audience. So just curious about like where you see the brand going. Is it kind of going to stay in the lane you're in today, or do you have bigger aspirations for it?
Definitely have bigger aspirations for it. I'm trying to figure out what that is. I've like everything that you just outlined. Those are things that I've been chewing on for some time. I've tried to form various communities throughout the years that haven't lasted, which is okay because I've learned from those experiences. I mean, the biggest thing is, I'm a one person operation right now, and I think the thing I learned is like I can't try to like manage a community on top of doing everything else and do it well. So it's a matter of figuring out like, okay, how can I build that, and how can I build it right in a way that makes sense for the brand. Some days I'm inclined to get that going sooner, and other days I'm like, no, this is okay. Like we need to take our time with this because we want to do it right. So it's all right to, kind of drag your feet on it, so to speak, until I can figure out the best way to do that makes sense. But yes, that's very much, I don't want it to be strictly clothing forever. I want there to be a more educational component with action items that actually help people so that they have, real knowledge, real experiences that they can lean into to help themselves. And, that kind of answers the question from earlier of where can it go from here? I think at some point I will probably step away from how involved I am with the artistic side of it as it stands right now to focus on reflecting more on what I've learned from my experience and repurposing that content to help other people. When that'll be, I don't know. And I'm okay with that because I know I've got a ton to learn, and the more that I keep going, the clearer that'll become to me. But yeah, that's the cool thing about it. And that's the cool thing about having that abundant mindset. It's like, I feel like there's like 30 different things I can do, which I love. That might sound overwhelming to some, but for me, I'm just like, I'd rather have 30 options than only have one, or none, or, whatever.
I think that's something that a lot of creatives, value is having the freedom to go explore and experiment. And I think for some things you have to do that. Like you have to go down a path to see if is this the one I'm supposed to go down further. And for some people, you have to experience a little bit of that. You just can't analyze it and pretend. You got to go down that path a little bit and say, okay, this isn't what I thought it was. Let me pull back. But that's the only way you're going to find yourself going down the right path for Dreaming Big, is to experiment these other ones and see, is this really right or not? Some of it's a feeling thing. Some of it is a market telling you like, okay, we don't want this from Dreaming Big, so as much as I might want to do that, I got to listen to my audience and my community and not do it. I think just from my standpoint, because community is something that I really appreciate. I have a community for financial advisors, totally different than Dreaming Big. But I think that going back to the hundreds and the way I think about pursuit and what I want to see happen is you probably have more community than you realize. It's just undefined and it's out there. And I think that's great to get going. And, you can continue to build community behind the brand and the messaging of Dreaming Big. And then as you add some other offerings, like maybe you bring the podcast back in the future. And now you have listeners. And now you've given this community something else from you. And then one day it'll click and like, okay, this is where I can give my community a place to hang out. And because the community has grown, you don't necessarily have to be as big of a part of it as you would if you started it today and tried to build from scratch. So, and that's, what the hundreds have done. You look at NFT projects and all these other things that the community gobbles up. They didn't necessarily set out and say, hey, we want to build a community to be able to have all these other products. It's just, hey, we've got our message. We're doing our thing. We're creating dope clothes. People like it. We're going to keep being who we are. And then that builds up the fan base, which becomes the community. And that gives you a lot of options from there. So you probably have more community than you realize. You got one community member.
So, to that note, how did you go about forming your community?
It's not so different from what I laid out. So I have a co-founder, and I actually approached him about doing a marketing/branding newsletter for financial advisors. He's a marketing whiz, SEO. Like, I'm not that detailed, but I love like branding and ideas. I thought we could together put together a good newsletter. And he came up with the idea of doing a community. And at the time, I was trying to go down a path of working with entrepreneurs at my planning firm. And the ultimate end game was I wanted to create a community for entrepreneurs. And the only way to be a part of that community was to be my client. And when he threw that out there, I was like, all right, I was going to build a community over here, but maybe it's supposed to be over here. The way we built it was we went back to the advisors we'd had one-on-one, like pick your brain sessions on. And we put together a list of like 300 advisors over basically a year and a half that we had calls with independently. And just said, hey, we sent them an email. We've talked over the last year, about business. We're putting together this community. We thought you might be interested in it. We have an opening date. We're hoping to get 50 people in because it's a paid community, not a free community. And within 72 hours, we had our 50 first members. So it was like we were genuinely interested in talking to other advisors to learn. We were happy to share abundant mindset once again to try to make other advisors better if they thought they could learn from us. But in doing that, we were building community and we didn't know it. And then the idea came, we had the platform for it. And now we have like 175 advisors across the globe that share and help each other get better, which is really cool because most advisors see another financial advisor as a competitor. So we just built community off of genuinely looking to help people, realizing that we could get more of these people together, provide a platform for them, and then the community's grown from there. We just released a book. So I think community is very hard to do right. And I think when you go into it with a view of this is how I'm going to build it, it becomes harder. I think the best way to build community is to just allow your fans to continue to follow you and grow that fan base. And then one day put it together. Here's how I can help these people get together. So now these like-minded people have a place to get together, to share a common interest, get to know each other. And then that's where the real magic of community happens. Because a lot of communities have all these other offerings, technology, and there's like other things that people want to buy into the community for. I think the best communities it's all about the people inside of it. So I just think you keep on doing what you're doing. I think giving your followers more access to you through like the podcast or writing or something like that strengthens the community. And then one day maybe you say, hey, we've got a bunch of people that have been emailing, like you set up a Slack channel. And I've seen big communities start out just in a Slack channel and then they outgrow Slack and they move to a platform. But I think it's slow and organic is the best way, which I think is the best way for a lot of things to grow. If you put too much pressure on it and you try to form it into something, I think you end up stifling the growth.
So then when you had your 50 advisors sign up, what So like, let's say I'm one of those 50 that signed up. Next week, do I get like an email that only goes to that group? Like what did that give me access to, and how often did you guys have to feed it, if that makes sense, to kind of, because I think one of the goals is like you kind of want them to run themselves a little bit, but I think there's got to be some sort of moderation, and some ones need to drive the boat a certain way for it. Maybe not, but like just to keep it going, to keep the activity going.
Yeah. So we opened up in August. We thought we would start it in October. We gave ourselves plenty of time to get it. And so we scrambled, and basically in September, we opened up the community. So our community, we use a platform. We started out on Mighty Networks. We merged over to Circle, which these are platforms built for community. So part of the community access was think of it as a combination between like Facebook, Twitter, and Slack. You got access to this online community that no one else got access to. And in there were other financial advisors who were willing to share. We had guest speakers. So every month we had a guest speaker. And in the early days, we had a guest speaker every week. We launched in 2019. So we were getting things going right before COVID. So everybody was living on Zoom anyway. So we had industry speakers, but one of our first guest speakers was Rory Sutherland, who's a marketing genius and has a book called The Alchemist, Alchemy, which was an amazing marketing book. He came and spoke to us. So we had guest speakers. There were some resources in there. But what it really got you to was access to this online website where no one else could go into that wasn't a member. So now there's masterminds that have formed in there. We have guest speakers every month. We have a marketing office hours with my partner, Taylor, again, who's a marketing wizard, and people would pay thousands of dollars to consult with him. And he comes in every month on the first Tuesday of the month and has a marketing office hours with our members. That's part of the membership.
That's awesome.
So there's those things that way where I think that like sometimes the community is just giving people a place to get together to talk about like-minded things. So like I think about dreaming big. What I would think about is, maybe there's a monthly office hours with you to hear about what you're working on, and just giving people more access to a brand that they love. Everybody in the outside is not going to get to hear about the next project you're working on, or who you're collabing with. And maybe one month you bring in somebody that you happen to know with through your network connections that me as a community member would enjoy hearing from and having the opportunity to ask that person a question. So I don't think that you would have to do a lot. It depends on what you promise and also maybe what you're charging. But I think that you are right that a really strong community doesn't need the founders to run it after time. If you have a strong community, then you have community members who want to step into roles of leadership. So I mentioned the book. We had a community member that she headed up basically the whole organization of the book. And she wanted to, and she volunteered to do it, and she loved every moment of it. So a really strong community will naturally have some people in it who love it so much that want to take on some leadership roles. And, maybe you throw them some extra swag, or you give them some extra perks for taking on a leadership role. But we have a community manager now. So Mallory handles all the onboarding and organization of the platform. But other than that, the life of the community is the people that are in it. And we're lucky enough to attract the right people who wanted to be there. And the final thing I would say as you think about a community for dreaming big is you want people who want to come to the community to give more than they take. What is it about this community that somebody from the outside could come in and give to the community? Because if more people are giving, then there's the ability to grow and learn. So, there's tons of ideas that pop in my mind that I can give you offline, and we can have another call, not podcast wise, and just say, hey, here is what we've experienced. Here's what I've seen other communities do that maybe would work for dreaming big, just to plant that seed and let it grow. But I kind of love that we went this direction and just, business ideas on the fly, because it's part of the creative process.
Yeah, no, and I'll take you up on that. So I hope you were serious about that offer. Right. But as you explained all that, one of the things I thought of, that is probably a big reason why mine failed, so to speak, was that, my intent every time I created, whether it was like a Facebook group or a Discord or whatever, was I really wanted there to be a place where people could come and network with each other to to get ideas about, okay, this is what I'm trying to do. This is the thing I'm struggling with. And at that point, I envision other people being like, oh, here's something you could try. Here's something you could try, blah, blah, based on what I've done or based on what I saw. And when that never really happened, it was like, oh, okay, that, you know, this is going to require more work than I can give it or what I know that I need to supply. Mm-hmm. So it's like, all right, well, maybe I need to repurpose and start with maybe some more like-minded individuals that way we can start kind of, maybe I just start with like creators or something like that and then branch out from there, but we can offline about that.
Well, as you say that, the thing that pops in my mind is I think that the marketing behind like why the community exists is important. So to me, it would be, you know, the Dreaming Big community is for the dreamers. This is a community for like-minded people who have dreams they want to pursue and want to help each other be able to do that. And I think that you leave it at that. So that way I know that, okay, if I'm going to join this community, there's going to be other creative people who are looking to build brands, whatever it might be. And we all know that we can't do it by ourselves. So let's join this community and share each other. And then, you know, maybe you make the promise that once a month you'll have some type of guest speaker come in and talk about something. And if you find out a lot of your community members are interested in clothing, then it's okay. We'll have somebody come in and talk about sourcing and somebody come back in about design work and marketing and those types of things. SEO to get it in there, how to use paid ads and Google, you know, ads and things of that sort. Like you could bring in somebody once a month. So you're committed to 12 speakers that would be valuable to that community. And then I do think I always think an office hour, because every person who joins a community is a fan of the person starting it. And if you can give them access to you, even though you might feel like you're not anybody special, somebody's looking up to you and they would enjoy having more of your time. And 1 hour a month to talk about what's going on in Dreaming Big and then just answer questions or talk shop, like people would value that. And I think that right there would be a great foundation for a small community. And then you just naturally let it grow, whether it be word of mouth or, you know, when you're sending out shipments, you have a little flyer you put in there about, hey, the Dreaming Big community, here's what it's for, you know, and you know, maybe it starts out as a free community. And then as time goes on and the community grows, you find ways to offer more value, that now you have a tiered system. So there's always a free level, but if you want more, you know, you can step up. You start putting people together like mastermind groups. Like I could see where that would take off. I'm a part of another community it's all for creators. So like these things exist out there and there's more than enough opportunity to help people. So we'll definitely chop it up on.
Yeah, because it's like I said, it's something that I've attempted and failed a few times now. So yeah, but it's also it's something that I value, and it's something that I do want to provide. Which I guess that was, you know, the original question. To circle back a little bit. So yeah, I'm glad we're having this conversation.
Yeah, let's get to your creative process, because I you know, Pursuit itself is not exclusively for creatives, but I do think I will attract a lot of creatives. What does your creative process look like? So if you don't have a background in art, you have a background in kinesiology, at least from an education standpoint, how do you come up with your ideas and kind of source those?
So, I mean, I know you probably want a direct answer, and I'll get there eventually, but it's something that's forever changing and forever evolving. You know, the way I designed stuff 15 years ago compared to now is completely different. Like I said earlier, you know, I started out by just seeing things that I liked, and my process was, I wonder if I can make a Dreaming Big version of that. And kind of like the process you described earlier with your logo, it was very much like that was it for a very long time. There were pros and cons to that. The pros were that in the process, I was teaching myself how to create these things digitally, and whether it be Photoshop or Illustrator, which I didn't have any experience in those programs either. So it's like I'm having to Google, YouTube, whatever, what I thought the effect I was trying to create was in my best way possible, you know, because I don't know all the jargon and all that. And then I'm watching tutorials on like how to do it. And, you know, in the process of that sparks a new idea. And it's like, ooh, okay, there's another lane I can go down if I want to. And yeah, that was my process for a very long time, was just recreating other stuff, putting my spin on it. The con to that was I felt incomplete. Like I felt like I wasn't really creating. I thought I was just like copying other people's work essentially. Granted, I was still making my own, but it didn't feel as authentic. I carried on that way for probably about 12 years, and I got better about getting further away from what the inspirational piece was to start. And I think about 3 years ago, I finally had the realization that I'm making my own designs that I can stand by and say that they are original. And I think it was just a process of doing things that way for so long, but knowing that at some point I gotta get away from that and just do things on my own. And that's where I'm at now. Even like preparing for this podcast, you sent over a list of things that we're going to talk about. Previously, I probably would have gone through and written everything that I wanted to say out so that I'd be super organized and whatnot. I went through and kind of answered each question in my head, and I did this over a course of a few days. And I really just thought and kind of chewed on things for a while. And then today came and I kind of just shut everything off and was like, all right, I've kind of done the mental prep work that I want to do for this. And I think I've got some good talking points stowed away. And I'm going to shut all that off. And then once we hit play, I'm just going to let the magic happen. And whatever happens, happens. And that's more my creative process now. I will, I usually have a vision of what I want to create. Not that I'm married to it, because I want to leave room to go in different directions if that's what happens in the process. But yeah, that's really the process. Is I'll consume as much as I can, as much as I think I need to about what I'm trying to create. I'll look at what others have created that might be similar, or if there's certain color schemes that I like, the way that they're put together. I'll go through this period of consumption, and then when it comes time to create, somewhere in between there, I'll just shut things off and stop looking at anything. And then when it comes time to, start painting, whatever it may be, I just kind of let it flow and go from there. Sometimes I stay, on a path, and sometimes I just kind of let myself go, and whatever happens, happens. And, it's like one of the things Rick talks about. He's like, the audience doesn't know what they want. They only know what's come before them. And when you hear that, it's like, wow, okay, that's pretty damn empowering. It's like you feel good about your creations when you hear something like that. And that's one of the things I lead with. That's one of my, I just rewrote, or I'm in the process of writing my core values for Dreaming Big for myself and for my fitness pursuits as well. But like one of my Dreaming Big core values is play the game different, which goes away from how I started designing, because I wasn't playing the game different. I was playing the game the way everyone else was. So, I guess what I'm illustrating is like, that's like a 15-year period of growth of not knowing what I'm doing at all. And I don't know if I know what I'm doing now. I feel like I have a better idea for sure. And I like the direction things are going. And I feel like I have a good process in place. But I know I'm a student to this. And I know I'm going to keep learning the more that I do it. And I know that my process is going to keep changing the further I go. So long-winded answer. But yeah, that's my process.
Hey there, about that time for a quick interruption. This time not really an advertisement, more of an ask. I hate that I have to ask you for reviews and likes and shares, but that's the way the game plays. The algorithm loves to get feedback, comments, likes. So if you wouldn't mind, if you're enjoying the show On Our Pursuit, or anything that it is that I'm doing, take a moment and subscribe to the YouTube channel, leave a comment, leave a review, 5-star rating, whatever the rating might be on the podcast player. please help me grow this show so more people can find the episodes a little bit easier. Now, I believe over time it's going to find everybody that needs to find it, but if I can get a little bit of help to speed that process up, I would really appreciate it. So as much as I hate asking about it, if you have not yet, subscribe down below on YouTube, leave a review, leave some comments, help this show be found by more people so more people can be inspired to go on their own pursuit. All right, let's get back to this conversation with Scott. I think the beauty in what you described is that it is a process and it is an evolution. And I think so many people never make that leap because they feel like they have to have everything perfect, have it all planned out and know exactly how they do it. Whereas just sometimes you just got to go and figure it out. And in the early stage for you, going and figuring it out was finding stuff that you liked and putting your own spin on it. And because you did that, you grew as a creator, you learned how to do things, you became more creative because, like you said, one idea spurs another one. And then before long, yeah, you might have seen something, but you have a brand new idea that is 4 iterations away from the original one that no one could ever connect to. And you don't even connect it to it anymore because it's become so much of your own. But you never get to that point of being able to create at that level if you never get started. So I think that's a beautiful story, a beautiful journey, because so many people are holding back because they don't see themselves as creative. And I'm only copying. Well, every creative person starts with an idea usually tied back to somebody else's. Very rarely is an idea original from the very beginning of that idea. It's tied back to something else. And the best creators are just good at evolving it to make it their own, to where it's not identifiable behind. But I think that's awesome, and hopefully inspiring to people who are sitting on the sidelines wishing they would get started. Just say, get started, even if it is copy, even if it's just you copied it exactly as the way it is in a notebook for yourself and you never share it with the world. That's the first step. And then you begin to play with that and you iterate with it, make it your own, and then you share it with somebody, and now you're on your path to becoming a creator in your own right. But it is going to always be an evolution. And I guarantee what you're doing in the next 15 years will look totally different than what you're doing now. And my final comment, that you spurred a lot of thoughts in my mind. I don't think we ever really know what we're doing.
I don't think so either.
I think we're all, going to Savvy, we're all ducks on the water looking calm as can be, feet going crazy underneath it. And
right.
If you can embrace that and realize you don't have to know everything, you have to know a little bit more than maybe you knew before and just keep on one step forward, then you're making progress. But I don't think you can ever, especially as a creator, know it all.
No. And to your point about recreating things, reverse engineering them, copying them, whatever you want to call it, think about musicians. Mm-hmm. Like, they don't just pick up an instrument and are able to write a song. They learn how to play by playing songs that came before them. Mm-hmm. Like Bruce Springsteen talks about this in one of his podcasts. Like, that's how he learned to play guitar, is he's just sitting there copying, if you want to call it that, works that were made before him. And like, that's how he learned. And it's such an important part of the process for, like I said just before, reverse engineering how things work. And that's how you figure it out. And then, like I said, it's like, then you start going down other paths, and then you get in deep into the woods, and you're, you've veered off of what you intended to do. And like, that's where it happens. Mm-hmm.
Have you found that the works that you're least excited about often are the ones that get the most positive reception?
Sometimes, yeah. I think sometimes I'll release. I mean, anymore, I feel pretty good about most of the stuff I put out, because I think you have to. Like, if I don't have a connection to it, I don't think I'm doing the audience. I don't think I'm. What am I trying to say?
I'm gonna hop in. I'm gonna interrupt you on that, because I know where you're going. I think basically what you're trying to say is if you don't feel like you really like it, then you're doing them a disservice by releasing something that's not up to your standards.
Right. If I don't like it, like, what am I doing wasting someone's time potentially releasing? But then at the same time, it's like, I'll post something on Instagram that I'm like, man, I really don't like this design. And it might not be something that I'm selling. It might just be a promotional thing. And then a bunch of people love it. And I'm just like, okay, well, what the hell do I know?
I think it has showed up on Rick Rubin's Instagram sometime in the last week that they only stay up for a day and then they go away. There's actually a bot out there that captures them all. But it was something to the extent, like the premise of it is, it's not up to the creative or the creator to decide what is good or bad for the consumer or the person looking at the art. Meaning, you're not doing them a disservice by putting out something that you don't absolutely love. Because although you might not absolutely love it, as you've seen, somebody else out there might. And if you don't release that work, then you're cheating that person who would have enjoyed it out of having that work. So I think that, like, obviously there needs to be a quality standard. The material's got to be good and you've got to put the work in. But if you look at it and you're like, yeah, that's just okay. But if you know that you put in the work, somebody out there might like it, and you might take that opportunity from them, take the opportunity away from them from having that because you didn't think it was good enough. It's not your job as the artist to decide if it's good enough.
And that reminds me too, it's been a couple years ago I kind of realized that the moment whatever I put into creating something, that's fine. That's my meaning that I associate with it. But the moment that I release that to one other person, mm-hmm. The art is open to their interpretation. Mm-hmm. And whatever that is fine. Whether they love it, whether they hate it, whether it reminds them of something, whatever it may be, that's out of my hands. Mm-hmm. Which that's part of what art is, whatever my intent is for it doesn't have to be how you see it, mm-hmm. And that's okay. Like, that's part of what goes into it.
So what's coming up next for Dreaming Big? Like, we've talked about maybe a community. Is there anything that you're thinking of or working on that you're excited about?
Man, I got a long list of designs, I don't want to say similar to the one you're wearing, but that are definitely the children of that are coming out that I'm working on. I'm in the process of outsourcing the manufacturing of things because right now I currently make everything myself. I currently make most things myself to order, which, as you can imagine, is very time consuming. So, I'm beginning to outsource some of the production. I want to be involved in the creative process still, which I will, but that's one of the hesitations I've always had with outsourcing. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, I'm kind of taking the actual building of bringing this to life out of it to an extent. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's in the I'm looking forward to that because that will give me more time to do things like run a community and make some headway on some of the other non-creative, if you want to call them, aspects of the company that I've been meaning to start. So there's that. We've got some equipment upgrades that are going to allow me to do some cool things that I'm excited about. Kind of going back to process a little bit. For the longest time, it's like, yeah, I was making clothing, but a lot of my more creative pursuits were happening in the marketing material in Photoshop. Mm-hmm. And it was, I felt the disconnect there because I'm like, okay, I'm spending all this creative energy on creating this cool graphic, but that's not it. Yes, it's a part of the brand, but it's not the product. I'm not spending. I didn't feel like I was spending as much time as I should on the creative part of the product. And once I was able to realize that, and I was like, okay, I can take some of these things that I'm doing in Photoshop, and if I can figure out ways to apply that to a hoodie, making that my canvas. This sounds like an obvious thing, but once that light bulb went off, once I had that realization, it's like, oh, I can still do a lot of these things I'm doing in Photoshop on physical apparel. Mm-hmm. It was like, oh man, the sky's the limit once I had that. So I know that's kind of a vague answer to what's coming, but I'm really excited about a lot of the stuff that, a lot of the apparel that's coming. Just, I think you're going to see some things that are truly different mm-hmm. and unique. And, yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
Okay. That's a good tease. This is a question of vulnerability, and you can pass on it if you want, and we can edit it out if we need to. At what point, what needs to happen for you to go all in on Dreaming Big?
It's financial right now, and I don't have a problem with that being a part of the interview, because it's real, and it's something that everyone it's a big hurdle for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
3 years ago when my fiance and I moved to Philadelphia, before that, I'd worked in youth sports and education for about 10 years, and I operated Dreamin' Big on the side.
Mm-hmm.
So once we moved to Philly, obviously I was going to be losing my full-time income. I intended on finding a job in Philadelphia, but wasn't having a lot of success. So I thought, you know what? Like, okay, Dreamin' Big is producing this at this input, which is only a few hours of my free time each day. And in my mind, I'm like, well, what would that result be if I'm able to dedicate everything to it? Very optimistic way of looking at things. But in hindsight, I just didn't have a great plan, because I was operating this thing in my free time, kind of doing what everyone else was doing. All these big brands were doing, seasonal releases, seasonal collection releases, really just following what everyone else was doing, and not really having my own structure in place or having the community to support it, because that's a big part of it too.
Mm-hmm.
You can't dump a bunch of money into a bunch of product if you don't have people that are ready to buy it. I mean, you can, but it's going to be tough, especially if stuff isn't moving as quickly as you want it to, and that slows everything down. That slows the whole process down. If you're sitting on a bunch of inventory that isn't moving, it's like, all right, well, I know I need to start working on this next collection, but if I don't have the funds to source that collection, then what? We're kind of stuck a little bit. So that was a big thing that held me back 3 years ago, is just not having. So then it was like, okay, how can I do it? How can I do this where I can move at the speed of social media, so to speak, but not have to invest a bunch of money that I don't have into having product on hand? And that's where I came up with, all right, we got to be a little bit more dynamic with our approach. We got to offer some stuff that's just pre-order only. We got to do some stuff that's just made to order. And then if we can start outsourcing some of the production in a way that's healthy and makes sense from a financial standpoint, then we're kind of moving in that direction. It's slow, but it's working. Mm-hmm. So, that's the biggest thing.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because that whole dialogue and what you shared, I think is important for people to understand, because I want people to follow their passions. I want them to bet on themselves and go, create these businesses that they want. And I think a lot of times that process is glamorized. Like, it's just, you gotta want it bad enough and it happens. And if you weren't successful, that means you didn't want it bad enough. Well, that's not true. So just the thought process and the way you explained it of, doing the pre-orders and doing some on hand and doing made to order type things and piecing it all together so that you're moving to the direction to one day it can get there. I think that's very valuable. And I think that's true of all businesses, not just, clothing brands. And one of the things I just want to point out, you mentioned inventory and having the community to buy. I don't know if you found this to be the case, but a lot of people talk like they really love what you're doing and they're going to support it. And like, oh, I love that, you should make that. And you go make it, and then crickets, they don't show up to buy. I don't say that to say you should support people if you don't really believe in it, but just to let people know that, when you encourage people and say you're going to support them, that sends them down a path. And if you don't show up to support them, you're kind of setting them up for a hard time. So if you're that person who's like, oh, I love that, I would buy that, and then you don't show up, just realize you're making creators and entrepreneurs' jobs and lives a lot harder. So don't say, I know you mean it well as a compliment, but also remember that sometimes people take those things like, great, I've got enough people who are interested, I'm going to go do it. And if nobody shows up, it can be frustrating, financially and just from a confidence standpoint. So clothing brands are a lot harder than people realize.
And to that point, that was the lesson I learned early on, is like, you can't act on every suggestion that you get. Like, definitely, examine it, but like, because I've made that mistake before, in the early days, where someone said, oh, you should do this, and it's like, you're just reacting. You're like, oh, that's positive feedback. Okay, I need to respond to that. And then you do too much of that, and then it's suddenly like you're working for everyone else and not yourself. And that might not be, what you want from it. It's like, okay, then you kind of like lose power over your own creation because you're letting other people dictate it. So it's like, obviously feedback is great, but it's at the end of the day, it's just feedback.
Thinking back over your journey so far with Dreaming Big, in the effort to try to help people, what would be something that you would do differently, or a lesson that you learned that would maybe have sped up your process that you'd want to help somebody learn sooner than later?
In hindsight, I don't have a ton of regrets because, and I know this is kind of a cliche answer, those failures have definitely helped me and helped drive me into the direction and have led to where I am today. So like one of the, I don't want to say I love failure, but like I definitely respect it because of what you can learn from it. And that's been huge for me personally and for the brand. I think on that note, I think if I could do it all over again, I would move a little bit faster about making things happen, about some of the risks that I needed to take just to speed that process up a little bit, especially not knowing anything, being completely self-taught. But then at the same time, it's like, there's only so much time in the day. And when you're, kind of moving in the dark, so to speak, there's only so much you can do, there's only so many directions. You don't really know what the thing you're going for, what it might look like at the end of the day. So it's hard to know exactly when to make those moves. But I would say that. I mean, I know that's not a great answer, but I think where I sit now, it's just I think I would have moved a little bit quicker in making more and just having an abundance of designs on hand. That way I just would have a little bit better of a system in place. And I guess on that note, maybe I'm just kind of talking myself into this answer too, is I would have found a way to be more structured with the creative process and just running the business in general. Because for the longest time, it was just like, no, I'll just figure it out as I go. Which is a fine way to operate, but also it's hard to accomplish things in a certain degree when you're just kind of going with the flow. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And it creates when you're not in the future. You got to go back and build the systems that you didn't have at the beginning. And usually that means you're reversing weak systems that are there. So, I mean, I think there's a little bit of element of you just got to go figure things out. But then as you start to get some traction, start to put in some systems early on so you don't have to go back and reconfigure things and build new systems.
And that's something that I've been going through the past year or so. It's like, okay, I gotta redo some of this stuff. And in the moment, it kind of sucks because you're like, this is time that I need to be spending on producing orders or creating new things. But you got to look at it from the big picture of, no, this is going to enable me to do bigger and better things down the line. So it's important to not only do this, but like do it right. So we've got systems in place to optimize things moving forward from a creative standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, from a community standpoint, whatever it may be, all those things that go into this.
How beneficial is not the right word. Like, how important has it been for you to be able to bet on yourself and express yourself through dreaming big? Like, if you think about your life without dreaming big, how much better off are you because you have it?
I don't even know if I can quantify that, man. I mean, I'm a completely different person than when I started this brand. And I don't want to say that's because of Dreaming Big, but I think it's because of the mindset. I'm constantly looking for ways to just be a better person in general for first and foremost for myself, because, you know, if I'm not taking care of myself, then I can't serve others. I can't take care of other people around me, which I've definitely been down that road and tried that, where it's just like, no, I can worry about myself later, you know, and I'll get enjoyment from helping someone or whatever it may be. So I'm glad I realized and I'm in the process of going through that shift. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like the message of the brand, it's like, you know, I'm living that too, kind of like we talked about earlier in this. It's like I'm taking everything that I learn personally, whether it applies directly to Dreaming Big or not. I think it does in some way, shape, or form, because at the end of the day, it's about, you know, sharing experiences and providing tools to potentially help other people. Or like a lot of the stuff that I post on the Savvy page is, a lot of that stuff isn't even intended for other people. It's more just a reminder to myself. It's like something that I realized or was reminded of in the process of doing whatever it was that day. And you know, the major reason that I share it is that it's like, all right, I know there's at least one person out there that this will help. So that's good enough for me. But yeah, I know that's kind of a vague, open-ended way of answering the question. But yeah, Dreaming Big applies to me too, and it probably applies to me more than anybody else, to be honest with you, because I'm the one creating it. So if I'm just going to stay static and not improve and be the same for the rest, well, you know, we don't really stay the same. We're either getting better or getting worse. So, you know, if that's how I'm going to be, I'm kind of a fraud as far as, you know, pushing this message for other people. So.
No, I think it's a great answer. All right, well, we're at the part of the show where I have a few just random questions, and so if people know, Scott mentioned I sent over kind of an outline. We went way off of it, so which is what the conversation was supposed to be. So I have no problems with that. But questions I didn't even send today. So a few quick ones. When you're creating, so you're creating designs or whatever it might be, is there a certain type of music that you like to listen to?
It depends. Some days I'll listen to classical music. Some days I'll do instrumental hip hop. Some days I'll do, this is random, Cambodian rock, which I can't even remember how I stumbled into that realm, but I'm glad I did. I'm hip hop fan through and through, so that, there's always a place for that. Sometimes I go down the classic rock. I'm all over the place. It kind of just depends on like how I feel that day. And yeah, that's really it. The Cambodian rock, though,
I'm going to have to check that out.
Highly recommend it.
I don't think I've ever listened. I'll have to check that out. Let's stay at hip hop real quick. Who is your Rushmore of hip hop?
Man, how old are you?
41.
How old?
41.
Okay. So we're in a similar boat. So these answers will probably like new age stuff. I don't want to say I'm out of touch with, but I'm definitely not as big of a fan as I am for some of the older stuff. Outkast, and I'm gonna say they only occupy one spot, even though there's two.
Yeah, they get one.
Snoop. And I'm talking, I think Snoop is up there probably because, like, Nothing But a G Thing is one of, like, growing up early 90s MTV era, like, that was a video that was on all the time.
Yep.
So we'll go Outkast, we'll go Snoop. Man.
It's tough to pick four.
It is. I'm a person who's like terrible with like defining favorites as well. Like if you ask me what a favorite movie is, a favorite song is, I'm just like, man, I don't know. But we'll get there. Outkast, Snoop, we'll put Tupac up there, and on that same vein, I want to put Biggie up there, even though for the longest time, I was more West Coast hip hop than I was East Coast. But then once I lived in Philly, I definitely developed a different appreciation for East Coast rap. Not that I didn't like it before, but it hits different when you're living on that side.
Yep.
So yeah, we'll go with that. I know that's kind of
That's
an obvious answer, but what about you?
So Pac and Biggie, Kendrick is up there. Kendrick Lamar. So Tupac has been my favorite forever. Kendrick Lamar, I think, has surpassed him. And then my fourth one, it's I think it depends on it could be Nas, it could be Jay-Z, it could be Nipsey Hussle. Like, it kind of depends on what type of mood I'm in. But Pac and Biggie and Kendrick are there. J. Cole could be up there as well. So it's hard for me to pick that fourth one.
Here's a question for you.
Yep.
Where's Kanye at?
So I look at Kanye as like two different careers as a musician, and not even like personality. When he first came out, I felt like he was a lyricist, and I loved his lyrics. I love his production. So College Dropout, Graduation, like I love My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Like, that's phenomenal. And like, to me, I felt like his wordsmith was really, really good. And then I think he pivoted to become more of an artist. And like the music he created, he tried to make art. So like the words to me didn't resonate. I love good lyrics. So then as he started to go down that path, I didn't love it as much. I wish he wasn't such a knucklehead when it came to like social stuff, so that it wasn't like a bad thing to like him. But I wouldn't put him up. I wouldn't put him up in my top 10 probably. But I mean, he's crazy talented.
That's the reason I asked. It's like a tough thing because, music-wise, he's so good at what he does. But then to your point, some of the stuff he does away from that, it's like, okay, I can't really support that, but I'm conflicted because he's done a lot of great things, which I don't think we need to just say like, oh, he's a terrible person because of XYZ. So yeah, that's why that's the reason why I ask.
Have you ever listened to the podcast Dissect?
No.
Cole Cushner's his name. And like, I was listening to it back when I was Patreon, and now I think Spotify bought it. But he is a music theorist, and he breaks down albums. He's done most of Kendrick's albums, but he's done some of Kanye's. And this is his speculation because he doesn't interview them, but when you hear the thought that went behind like the chords and the things that some of these musicians like Kanye do when they put into the music, like, it's stuff that the regular person, there's no way we could comprehend. Like, putting this note after that note, the reason he did that is it increases the emotion. Like, it's just crazy how thoughtful they were in putting it. And then like, I never really thought about like the sampling that Kanye did. Being able to go back to these old songs and finding this one song and this one part of this one random song that fits into this song perfectly. Like, how much time was spent finding that one piece to sample and the art behind that. So like, that makes me appreciate what he does even more, because it's way more than just beats. Like, there's a lot of thought that goes into it. And he's done some on Mac Miller's albums as well. And it's just like really, really cool to see this deeper level of meaning behind these songs and the way it's structured and orchestrated. It's really cool.
Did you watch Genius, the Netflix documentary on Kanye?
The first two were awesome, and the third one I just felt was sad.
It was, yeah. It was, one of my takeaways from that was like, okay, this dude was, in the first couple episodes you see it, it's like he's very confident in his ability and what he's creating, and he's looking for that validation. He's looking for a deal or whatever it may be. And then it's like once he got it, and it was, how many albums has he sold? It's like we saw how confident he was in himself before he made it. And then once everyone supported him the way they did and as fast as they did, that's a hard thing to deal with if you're not ready for it. And it's like, okay, maybe that it definitely impacted, the Kanye that we see today, having that type of validation repeated like year after year. You know what I mean? I don't know. We may, read studies on that type of thing down the line, but it's interesting.
And it definitely ties back also to like his mom passing. Like I thought that
Right.
to see there in that documentary, to see the relationship he had with his mom, one of my favorite parts was when they're in her apartment when they're back on, they're in Chicago for a tour, and she's singing the words to a song that was never released. Like his mom knew the lyrics, and like to me that was really really cool to see how much she believed in him and how much she loved what it was that he did. That she knew the lyrics to the song. It was awesome.
Yeah. That's my only comment on that, because I was sitting there thinking the same thing when you brought his mom up. The fact that she knew the words just as well as he did.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that. Yeah, that's an awesome thing.
All right. Final random question: Who inspires you the most? Like, who do you look to for inspiration? If it's another artist, business person, like who do you draw inspiration from?
To be honest, it's mostly internal, and I don't want that to sound like I'm high on myself, because that's definitely not it. But you know, I don't have a set answer as far as like visual creations. You know, there's definitely artists that Tristan Eaton is one of my favorite artists. Just like his murals are insane. Like the way he combines colors and just makes it all work. And yeah, definitely check him out if you haven't heard of him. Like his stuff he's got murals all over the world. And there's just something about him that they're insane. You know, he's probably my number one artist. You know, other people that I look up to just in general, you know, we already mentioned Rick Rubin. He's one. David Goggins is up there. James Clear is up there. And then, you know, just athletes in general. You know, I'm a former athlete. I really try to model my life outside of what I do from creative pursuits the same way an athlete does. You know, they have to perform at a very high level, you know, night in and night out. And that requires certain care to the body in terms of, you know, your nutrition, your rest, exercise, all that. You know, even though I'm not an athlete anymore, you know, I want to perform at a very high level. So those are things that I try to model after, so that I can be the best I can be, you know.
Who are the athletes that kind of stand out the most to you?
You know, one of the guys, he's not a superstar by any means, but he went to Iowa State, which is the college I went to, George Niang. And, you know, the reason for that is he was drafted by the Pacers 5 or 6 years ago, probably. It didn't work out there. And I actually interviewed him, and we talked about that a little bit. And he said one of the big things is, like, you know, everyone in the NBA is like an insane basketball player. Like you put them in a gym of non-NBA players, like they're going to be by far like the best athlete anyone on that court has seen from a basketball standpoint. So it's like the talent in the NBA is insane, first and foremost. And I know you're a basketball guy, so you know this. I don't need to tell you this. But it's, you know, these guys have to adapt to the situation they're in and find a way to adjust their skill set and really hone in on, maybe it's just one thing to be awesome at, you know? So it's just, you know, seeing his story and to seeing how he approaches his day to day. It's like, okay, like, even though I'm not an NBA player or aspiring to be, which that was my first dream. But it's like, there are things you can take from what they do and apply them to your life so that you can perform at a very high level. You know, as far as just favorite athletes go, I mean, Steph Curry is on a different level. I was kind of anti-Steph for a long time because everyone else loved him, but you can't deny his greatness and the stuff he's done and the stories that you hear about some of the mental work that he does. It's just, you know, it's inspiring. And it's like I was saying before, like, it doesn't, you know, these aren't things that you just have to apply to sports or exclusive to sports. They, you know, these guys and gals are doing things that we normal people can apply to our lives as well. So, yeah.
I love it. All right. So my final question for you, going back to music, let's say you are at a big conference, you're a keynote speaker, and they let you choose the music you walk out to. What would be the song that you walk out to? Question 1A. 1B is the song to get you hyped, or is it to get the crowd hyped?
I want to have a conversation, and maybe it's for another day about, because I'm the same way as you. I know that you asked this on I've only listened to a few of the other podcasts, but I don't know if it's been on everyone or not. But I'm interested to know, why is it that because I'm like you, I'm attracted to this question. Why does music have that type of impact on moments like that? Like, I think about walkout songs all the time, and I don't have anything coming up where I'm like, oh, I got to pick a walkout song. So it's like, it's one of those situations that like it doesn't happen very often. My fiance and I, we're getting married in July, so we're sitting there thinking of like, what's our grand entrance walkout song going to be? So it's like something I think about all the time. But, even having like a week to ponder this question, I couldn't come up with a good answer other than an answer that I loved, so to speak. I'm drawn to Industry Baby by Lil Nas X. I love the line where he says, run from nothing. There's something about that mentality that I think we all need to become more comfortable with in doing things that we're afraid to do or we're stressed out about or uneasy about. So that small line there comes back to me. The other one was Hypnotized by Biggie, just because, I don't know, there's just something about it. Okay. And then to answer the question, I think it's probably more to hype me up than it is the crowd. I mean, you want to play to the crowd a little bit, I think. But at the end of the day, that's for you. That moment's for you. That song is for you. And that's the intent of it. So, yeah.
So it's funny you mentioned the walkout song. I was very proud of the walkout song that we had at our wedding. So we'll be married.
What'd you go with?
So this will be our 17th wedding anniversary, be later this year.
Oh, man.
When it was our turn to come out, my wife is awesome because she allowed me to do it. I picked T.I.'s Bring 'Em Out.
Hell yeah.
So like the Bring 'Em Out, hard to yell about, like, not a great wedding song, but then like that just was like, I thought it was so awesome, and it was perfect timing. The doors open, so that was our walkout song.
How did you feel? How did that make you feel in that moment? Let's go back to it.
Yeah,
describe it.
I was just excited. Like I was bounced out, walking with some. Like,
you can't.
Swag wasn't even a thing back there, but I was just walking out. Like, it wasn't about like All Eyes on Me or anything like that, but that would have been a good one. All Eyes on Me by Pac.
Yep.
But it was just like it just brought a lot of energy, and I was already high energy. It's my wedding day. I'm excited, and like I love that song. I like T.I., so there's so many things to it, but it was cool. But I was gonna go back to like the music and why I don't know if it's because we grew up on hip hop, but I think there's something unique to rap and hip hop, that the music is inspiring. And I think a lot of it is just the subject matter, because a lot of times it's, people talking about coming from nothing and building something and the hustle to get there. And like, I've listened like to rap since I was little. Like, I remember waiting on the bus in 5th and 6th grade, listening to Doggy Style on since I was really listening to lyrics that I probably shouldn't have listened to.
Right.
It didn't lead me down a path of like crime and disrespect. Like, I knew those were just lyrics, but just the talk about the hustle and I think some of the confidence I have as an individual comes from listening to rap music, because it is a very confident music. The artists are rapping from a standpoint of being confident. And for whatever reason, that like poured into me. So I was always somebody that I always had a mix before every game, songs I wanted to listen to. And like, some of them were just hype songs, but some of them were songs that like, as I listened to it, like the beat, I was in my mind, I didn't dunk, but in my mind, I was dunking on the beat. And like, there's certain songs you would probably never listen to that I love because I somehow tied them into basketball or my day to day. So music has always motivated me, and I've always been able to pull in, and some of it goes back to my love of the lyrics, that I'll find little lyrics in a song. I mentioned Code of the Friend before we started recording. There's a song that I wrote yesterday's Daily Note about called Real Ones. And there's a line in it that really stands out to me that says, every superhero is destined to be someone's villain. So like, no matter how hard we want to please everybody, you're never going to make everybody love you. So it's less about appeasing all the masses and more about finding that internal happiness and being happy with who you are, because no matter how much you try to please everybody, you're not going to be able to. And so those people shouldn't matter. So for whatever reason, I think there's more in rap music that we can take away. And because of that and being in tune to that, it allows me to figure out songs like, okay, at this audience, what would get me hyped and get them hyped? But I think there's something with our history between the two of us growing up listening to rap music that plays into that. And I listen to everything. Like, you go through my iTunes, like there's country in there. I love Coldplay, like David Gray. Like, I have a eclectic library of music, but I'll never outgrow rap. Like, I would have thought by 41 I wouldn't be listening to hip hop still, and that's what I listen to most of the time. And I can't think of any other songs, like other genres, where the lyrics inspire and motivate me. And maybe they're out there, I just haven't listened to it, but
it's interesting. I thought I would grow out of hip hop, because I remember thinking that too when I was, probably more in my teen years, like, oh, there's probably going to come a point in time where, like, I'm going to become like my dad and just listen to the oldies or whatever the hell it is. And it's like, no, I feel like, listening to the oldies these days is listening to hip hop from the 80s and 90s, and like those are our oldies, so to speak. So it's interesting. It's like, I once did think that I was going to outgrow it, but do you find yourself, when a certain song comes on, like during a movie or a TV show or whatever, do you find yourself like analyzing those instances as well, similar to the same way you do with like walkout songs? Like, oh wow, like it's like, I'm trying to think of a good example.
I don't think I analyze it, but I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah.
Like, so thinking of, I watched the first two Creeds. I haven't seen Creed 3 yet, but like when he walks out in the final fight in the first one, it's Hail Mary by Machiavelli, but by Tupac. Like, I love that song. Hail Mary was one of the songs that was on my play mix in college, but I noticed that song and I was like, that's a great song for his walkout song. So it's more of, I appreciate when there's good music. Or like the Black Panther soundtrack was all Kendrick Lamar and TDE, and like not even all the songs showed up in the movie, but the few that did, like I definitely notice it, but less analyzing, more just appreciating, like, oh, that was a good song pick.
What's your favorite walkout song that someone else has used, whether it be like Mariano Rivera, or I have an answer for this, but I want to hear yours. Do you have one? If
I want to be honest, I don't know. I'm not a big baseball fan, so the walkout music for me on that standpoint doesn't come to me. And
what about like boxing, MMA, which I'm not into those super either.
I watched maybe some boxing. I can't watch MMA. Like, I've never been in a fight, so I'm not like a confrontational person. And just watching people wail on each other, like, I can't even watch the highlights that show up on Instagram. So I don't know. I would go with Creed's walking out to Hail Mary.
It's interesting you say that, because I'm the same way. I think that's part of the reason I don't have any dislike for MMA or anything, but it's because I can never envision myself doing what they're doing for whatever reason. No knock on anyone. It's like, I just can't get into it because I don't ever see myself, being in the certain scenario.
Yeah.
Different from like when you're playing basketball or whatever. It's like, all right, any of us can go out and shoot. But I think mine is
what's yours?
Look up Mike Tyson DMX intro.
I think I have seen that one.
It's the intro from It's Dark and Hell is Hot, and it's
yes,
man, it's such a I don't know what it is. Like, I can't put it into words, but like when I watch it, I'm just like, wow, that's like, these guys probably feel like some of the baddest motherfuckers on earth, and they should, because that's what this moment is saying to me.
That is a great walkout song for something like that. That DMX album is really, really good. There's a lot of good songs on there. Well, we went way longer than I asked you for, so I appreciate you staying on with me. And by the end of this, like, I'm talking to a friend, so this has been really, really cool. Which ties into my belief that, like, the universe connects people for certain reasons, and a lot of similarities between our upbringing, rap and basketball, and other things along the way, creativity. So I'm glad we got connected. I look forward to chopping it up about communities in the future and just kind of sharing some insight from what I've learned there. For anybody who wants to follow, I'll link to the Dreamin' Big website and all those things, but where would you want to direct people to follow you and learn more about you, the brand, or what you're up to?
It's all at Dreamin' Big, DRMN BG on Instagram and Twitter. That kind of funnels to everything else. I mentioned earlier that I Savvy has his own platform, but if you go to Dreaming Big, you'll find what Savvy's doing too. So we'll just keep it simple and leave it at that.
Sounds good. I feel bad we didn't give Savvy any love. So Savvy, for those who don't know, is the duck. Well, real quick, what's the story behind Savvy? And that'll be a good ending note.
Man, real quick.
Yeah, real quick.
I mean, it goes back to when I started all of this. We didn't really get into it, but oh man, I don't know if there's a quick way of doing it.
But take as much time as you need.
Okay, so it's 2006. I'm getting ready to graduate college, not really knowing what I want to do with life. I have I'm about to have my degree in kinesiology. Some friends and I, we take a trip for the 4th of July, and we find this like little wooden duck that like someone had in the house that we were renting. And it was like a box, like the body of the duck was a box. You'd find it like on your grandma's like center table in her basement or something. She put like magazines or I don't know, stuff in it to just hold stuff. And we stole it from the house, and we just kind of took it everywhere we went. And, like we're in college, so people are like putting beers in the back of it, kind of using it as a cooler. We're at this lake, so it's just like kind of floating around doing its thing. So at the time, it kind of became like our unofficial mascot. Mm-hmm. It had a different name. And that's kind of when the light bulb went off for me. It's like, oh, I could turn this into a t-shirt. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of like pre Dreamin' Big. That was the first design that I ever created and took to market and sold. It didn't last. I made a Facebook group for it, and I don't know how that went back then, because this is like very early Facebook. I don't even know if there were groups. But he had a decent following, friendship, whatever you want to call it, on Facebook. I didn't know what the hell to do with it, obviously. The duck itself got stolen. I believe someone broke its neck. So fast forward a few years, I guess, to when I made Dreamin' Big. When I came up with the concept, I wanted to have a logo, and I didn't really know what to do there. It was like, okay, I came up with this name, and this is what everything stands for. Like, what kind of logo would that be? And I just went back to what my first design was, which was of this duck that I made. He had a different name at the time. So that's why the eyes are X'd out. The duck is dead, but it symbolizes what got me into this in the first place. And then from there, it was like, all right, I'm building a character from him, which that's still a work in progress. Like he's still being developed, even 15 years later, which is totally fine. That's, it's part of the process. But, it was one of the first designs that I ever made. It's what opened my eyes to this journey and led me here to our conversation today.
Why the name Savvy?
I wish I had a good answer for that. I think I was just looking for, I felt like that was a good name for what I saw his role to be in the company at the time. And that was really it, because that's a lot of what he does. He's like I said before, he's sharing things that I'm being reminded of throughout my day to day. And yeah, that's really it. I wish I had a better answer, but I just felt like it was a unique name that described what he does. Mm-hmm.
I love the pictures where you have like the Savvy head, or if it's you or who, the Savvy head on. Like, it's awesome that you have a life-size one to wear. That's so dope.
Yeah, I should. I mean, I can throw it on quick. It's right here.
You know what? We should make that we should end with that, and we should make that the thumbnail cover. Is you with the head on it. I'll get one of those pictures.
We'll just give it the full branded experience.
Yes. This is so awesome. That's
I can't really see out of it, so okay, we're good here.
That's all right. All right, well, hey, we'll end with this. We'll end with Savvy joining us. So, everybody, I've got the links to Dreamin' Big down below. Scott and Savvy, thank you for sharing your story and the inspiration behind Dreamin' Big and everything that you're doing. I'm excited to continue following. And everybody, hopefully you can learn a lot from this story. It's great. So thanks for tuning in. Scott, thanks again. Show notes, everybody. Leave some notes down in the comments. Let Scott know what about his story motivated you and inspired you. Give him some feedback so he knows he's making an impact. And as always, let's keep pursuing.